I'm the Dean of the Library and the Director of the Schemel Forum. Welcome today to our fourth Schemel Forum luncheon of the semester. Like many of you, I am in awe of the power of art, recognizing that it speaks to us in profound ways. We may go as far as to say that art is possibly the language of the soul. Regardless of its medium, art connects us to the core of our humanity. Perhaps because of those reasons and more, art has played an essential role in shaping societies, fostering belonging, and promoting civil discourse. Public art in particular has the unique power to transform spaces, elevate stories, and deepen the connections within our communities. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce a remarkable advocate of this transformative power, Michelle Angela Ortiz, a visual artist, muralist, filmmaker, and an exemplary community arts educator. Michelle doesn't just create art, she builds bridges. I also want to share, and I think it's right after this slide, Michelle is joining us tonight to feature a documentary that she created. Waiting for this to turn over. Los Madres de Berks. It's not that one anyway, sorry. So Los Madres de Berks. Three back, okay. I'm sure everybody saw it. We're having a film tonight. Michelle is joining us. She will be available afterwards for a talk back, including one of our staff members and a community member will be there as well. We're very excited to host that tonight at 6 p.m. in the Pern Auditorium. We hope you can join us for that. Michelle has created and been involved in over 50 large-scale public works across the globe. In her work, she spotlighted the narratives of marginalized communities and used her artistic talent to foster spaces for critical dialogue. From Costa Rica to Cuba, she has not only beautified spaces, but has also ignited conversations. Her many accolades serve as a testament to the importance and the impact of both her art and art in general. And it underscores how every installation resonates deeper than what meets the eye. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Angela Ortiz.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Well, first, I want to just say thank you to George and Kim and University of Scranton for inviting me and being here. This is my first time visiting, but I have a really dear friend who is from here, and it's just so beautiful to be here and just get to know a little bit more of my dear friend and her family, and to feel welcomed. So thank you. And yeah, so I'm gonna just get started. There's a lot to cover. Yeah, here we go. All right. So, I wanted to start off with this. I'm sorry. There we go. So, my people are from El Caribe, land workers, healers, and bolero singers. My people are from La Costa, the Magdalena River, and brown women that cook, laugh, and love hard. My people are hovered over tins of fire, keeping the oldest outdoor market alive with their immigrant dreams. My people are the ones with calloused hands and warm hearts, surviving the trauma by sharing their stories and revealing their light. So, as a child of immigrants, a woman of color, a mother, and a product of two people that experienced extreme poverty that led them to immigrate to this country, our lived experiences, our ancestral heritage, and our stories are the deep roots to my work that I've done for the past 20 years. So stories are powerful, especially within the context that they're told or represented. So my creative process is activated through facilitating dialogues, identifying themes, translating these themes into visual representations and affirmations, and doing this with integrity and respect with the community. From murals to large-scale public art installations, I create engagement methods that take into account the issues of responsibility, accountability, and ethics, which is a larger dialogue that is needed in the field of social practice and community arts. So the common themes of immigration, social economic inequalities, and erased histories are present in my work as a way to record, reclaim, and elevate these stories that connect us to our humanity. Through the United States Embassy, I conducted a series of workshops on urban art and recovery of public spaces in Juarez, Mexico. This was back in 2009. I arrived to Juarez at a time where the city had surpassed over 2,000 homicides, and artists from the border town of El Paso would not set foot in Juarez. In 2006, many communities in Juarez lost their homes, family members, and possessions in a violent flood. A local privately funded foundation named FECHAC in Juarez rallied together to build a channel that covered 22.2 kilometers, that would protect the community from future floods. So although the channel would protect the community, it created a physical divide in the neighborhood. And so miles of gray walls where the channel existed became unused by the community. And so the intention of this particular project was to bring the community back into the space, for the community to reclaim this space. And so during the 2-week residency, I facilitated 4 intense community building workshops with local artists and community leaders. And Philly-based theater artist Julia Lopez also conducted writing workshops that informed the content of the collaborative mural design. So the words that you see presented in the actual murals were coming from these collaborative poems that were generated from the community members. Over 80 volunteers, college students, working artists, members of artist collectives and self-taught artists, graffiti artists, teens, parents ranging from ages 3 to 65 years of age came together to paint. Telling our stories gives us the power to define who we are and the ability to counteract false narratives of our communities. And so the project gave the community an opportunity to really shift the expectations of the United States Embassy and the local foundation. And these institutions didn't believe that the collaborative poems were created by the community members. And they were also amazed by how in a few days, the empty space became filled with children playing and youth working together towards something positive. This is also the first time that the US ambassador visited Juarez. And so he actually visited this community in particular to bear witness on the work that we did together. So the evening before the unveiling of the 100-foot mural that we did in 2 weeks, all of the artists and families were working outside, working to complete the mural. It was the moment, it was at that moment, the day before, where a rival gang showed up and attacked us. I was transported immediately in the US Embassy with the US Embassy representative as I watched the other community members run away with fear. And that evening, the local artist that I trained returned to the site and worked till 2 a.m. to finish the mural. And so this is the picture of the next day. After negotiating with the embassy, I returned to the site to find all of the community members ready to celebrate the work that we did. And so that moment, which have been I've been a witness to many beautiful moments, but this particular moment showed me the power of the community. In the midst of violence and fear, they showed up to lift up the work that we were able to do together. Years later, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, I worked with Talleres Protegidos, a 40-year-old institution that provides outpatient treatment of psychosocial rehabilitation for people with severe mental illness. I facilitated creative sessions with therapists, patients, and administrators using writing and movement exercises that helped identify their struggles with their mental health and the discrimination that they face in their lives. En los tiempos de elegir un lugar, en los tiempos de cambio y perder la lucidez, encuentro tu alma lleno de luz. This is just one of the many poems that were created with the different groups and patients at Talleres. In the times of choosing a place, in the times of change and losing lucidity, I find your soul full of light. So these poems and conversations led to the themes presented in the 150-foot mural created with the community. And there goes Angel, who is one of the participants that painted on the wall. And what you see here on the other side, from grid making to creating the grid, to mixing the paints, to the different areas in which everyone's working on. That is all coordinated with myself and training the local artists with the communities during my time that I'm doing my residencies. So in the sea of gray buildings in the community of Barracas in Buenos Aires, the mural stands as a beacon of light that represents their messages of hope in the midst of isolation and intolerance. So telling our stories gives communities visibility and value. In 2015, I had the honor of working with Habitajes in creating 2 murals with both the Masawa and Otomi indigenous communities. Our project De la Memoria al Muro gave me the opportunity to build from Habitajes' work and continue and connect directly with both communities and learn about their stories of migration, identity, and their struggle in claiming safe spaces for their families. The Masawa and Otomi indigenous communities come from smaller towns in Mexico, and these particular communities migrated from their small towns to Mexico City. So I trained local artists and indigenous youth to represent these stories in the creation of 2 60-foot tall murals in Mexico. So I led creative sessions that really inspired elders to share their stories of preserving their traditions. And the workshops also created a safe space where indigenous youth spoke about their lives in both worlds, and where the families, with their families in the city. And so the conversations really challenged the participants in addressing stereotypes and really thinking about how they want to define themselves. This next clip might be a little loud, but this is a quick clip of the work of the mural in progress with the indigenous youth and with the community members.
Yeah. Yeah, spark it up, get your whole house burnt down. To a crisp, let me give you all the rundown. It ain't never been a cause for me to turn down. So get ready when you hear we about to come round. Now, feel the rhythm in your backbone. You ain't shaking what you're coming in the shack for. Act mode like you wanna party when the track on. I'ma give it to you full throttle in attack mode. Satch mode when I'm on this thing. Spit flame, let her burn the whole Dak burn stage. When I wrote him in, it burned through the Dak burn pain.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So, and if you like the music, that's actually my husband. He's part of a band called Gangsta Grass to do bluegrass and hip hop. This beautiful image that you see here is of Doña Francisca. Doña Francisca is one of the elders that actually bore witness to each one of the stages of migration, arriving to Mexico City. A lot of the families, so with the actual building, which I'll be able to share that in a second. So the actual building represents all of the different stages, and I'll speak to that in this moment. But the idea is that the reason why this project was so important is because Mexico really boasts of the richness of their indigenous culture, but at times they treat living indigenous communities not with the respect and the dignity that they deserve. So both the Masawas and the Otomis communities migrated from their homeland, but they also faced a lot of discrimination in Mexico City. The building in which we were actually painting was a 20-year fight of the Otomi community to actually build secure housing for a lot of the families that were living in what's called casones, which were these set up made houses in Mexico City in empty lots. These were houses with no running water, houses with no electricity, very dangerous, especially when heavy rainfall would come through. It was very meaningful to create this mural in this space because they were able to finally have a home. The portrait of Señora Francisca, again, who shared her story in living in the streets of Mexico with other indigenous families, now owns her own apartment. And she had said to us in our sessions, is now I do not have to carry my life on my back anymore. And so it was just a beautiful moment because as we were painting this mural, a lot of the families were just moving into their apartments and bringing their belongings and finally entering into what is their permanent home. And so this is the mural which defines the different stages of migration. The image of the young boy in the center has the directional four pathways of Earth, which is based on the indigenous traditions. And the actual outline that you see is coming from the designs of the traditional embroidery of the Otomi community. And there's phrasing because their native language is Ñañu, because Spanish or Castellano is a colonizer's language, and Ñañu is the indigenous language of the Otomi community. And so there were phrases in Ñañu, in their native language, that speaks and teaches their young indigenous children the story of their migration and honoring that story. And the other great thing about this is you see the balconies. So the elders, some of the elders were able to walk to the balconies and still paint on the mural without having to get on the scaffolding. So telling our stories is a way of preserving our languages, cultures, and identities. Telling our stories is also a tool for advocacy and change. So in response to the rise of deportations in 2013, I created my Familias Separadas, Separated Families project, focusing on the stories of families living in Philadelphia and how they've been impacted by deportation. This project, this work started in 3 different phases. So Philadelphia, then the state of Pennsylvania, and then has expanded nationally. The main goal of the project was really to shift the focus from the statistics and numbers of deportations to seeing the father, mother, and child that has been torn apart by their families. The project developed in different phases, as I mentioned, but it was meant to act as ripples of water, ripples in the water. The phase 1 was unveiled in October 2015 in Philadelphia, and I partnered with a number of community members from Juntos, which is a local immigrant rights organization in South Philadelphia. I conducted workshops and interviews showcasing the stories of 5 families, and each story was then depicted in temporary site-specific public artworks in different locations in the city of Philadelphia. This image of Maria was placed in what's known as the Compass Rose in the courtyard of City Hall in Philadelphia. And Maria's husband lived in Philadelphia. He was deported. He attempted to cross the border again to be reunited with his family, and he was caught by ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, in Texas, and then served a 3-year jail sentence in California, and then was deported back to Mexico. At City Hall, Eres mi todo, which is translates to "You are my everything," is the title of this piece, depicts the portrait of Maria and her daughter, and it was placed on top of the Compass Rose by Edmund, which is a permanent public artwork by Edmund Bacon. And so this is really important because the Compass Rose in particular is where the north, south, east, and west meet. It's the center point of the city of Philadelphia. And so in this context, the story, her story, Maria's story, is centered at the same level of importance as William Penn, who is looming over her in City Hall. Maria continues to live in Philadelphia. She's now a single mother, and she's raising her 5 children. And her story, like the compass, serves as a symbol of migration and its connection to many immigrant families navigating through these unjust systems and searching for a better life in this country. And this is the image of the Compass Rose above in the city's courtyard. And this is the image of Maria and her son in front of the words of his mother. So Eres mi todo comes from Jose, Maria's husband, the letters that he would write to Maria. And this is actually his actual handwriting recreated in the piece. And he also would draw and paint. And so a lot of the flower patterns that were created for this piece were inspired by the letters that he would write while he was incarcerated and sending them to Maria. This was a beautiful day because their child and their younger children were running around the circle and playing in the courtyard. Part of this work, which was phase one of Familias Separadas, was also another installation that I did, which was on Monday, October 12th in 2015 on Indigenous Peoples Day. I organized over 30 volunteers and undocumented families to place the words of Ana, an undocumented mother, in front of the ICE building, the Immigration Customs Enforcement building in Philadelphia, which is located on 16th and Callowhill. Together, we installed, and I'll play the time lapse so you're able to see it, the 90-foot long words, "We are human beings risking our lives for our families and our future." And these words were placed at the exit point where the detained families members are then transported to other prisons to process their deportation. So the building on 16th and Callowhill is actually the first point of detention, meaning if someone is undocumented and they are detained, this is the first point where they're processed, and then they move through other prisons or other prisons or other facilities in which they're held throughout their detention. This is the time lapse of the actual installation. Sorry, and so this is the final piece that we created. And so this was also another high point in my career because it was a very powerful moment where we gathered as ICE agents were looking down on us, and we were installing this piece. And the families who would never even step foot into the space because of the fear that it causes, the fear of being separated from their families. We all stood together in creating this piece in front of this building, and together in solidarity and being fearless in this moment. This is the image of Alma with her children. Her husband was currently detained. And I can say there's victories in all of this. Her husband has been released since then and is now back together with her family. So in between the phases of Familias Separadas, I created another piece called Seguimos Caminando, which is We Keep on Walking. It's a moving monument on the gates of City Hall that brings to the forefront the stories written by the detained undocumented mothers through a series of animated projections. So for 5 months during the time that I was creating this work, I met with 2 mothers from Honduras and El Salvador that were detained for over 600 days, so close to 2 years, at the Berks County Residential Center. For those that do not know, the Berks County Residential Center was a family prison in Pennsylvania, the first family prison that has, when I say family prison, they have detained children as young as 8 weeks old, and mothers and fathers as well. And it's the first family prison. The other 2 are in Texas, but it's the first family prison in the United States, here in our state of Pennsylvania, with a record of human rights abuses. So Berks is, again, the oldest of the 3 family prisons. And the work that I was doing during this time, there was a very strong campaign to release the mothers, the families from this prison. And so prior to connecting with the mothers really only shared their stories connected to campaigns or immigration campaigns, trying to either building for the campaigns for advocacy or for their court cases. And so in knowing this, my visits were really centered on their continued light for freedom and their continued fights and lights for freedom, and trying to remind them of their strength and their love for their children and their resilience in the midst of a system and a place that wants to dehumanize them and criminalize them. So understanding that trauma causes powerlessness and insecurity and stress and fear, I really asked the mothers to think about these core questions. What gives you strength in moments of darkness? When is a moment that you felt the most free? And what is your wish for you and your child? And so it was through these conversations that the mothers were able to write combined stories that then shared their experiences. This is one of the excerpts that came from the writings from the mothers. And these projections were mapped onto the north side gates of City Hall. And you would, while you're walking through City Hall, you would actually be able to hear the voice of Lorena, one of the mothers, sharing her story. And I will play that for you right now.
Caminaba por la casa de mi mamá sobre el suelo de tierra. Jugaba con mis hermanos, meciendo la hamaca de multicolores y envueltos de árboles, de jocote y cerezas que bailaban con el viento. Junto con mi mamá íbamos al río soleado para bañarnos. Años después, jugaba con mis hijos en ese mismo río. Un día me amenazaron y me tocó irme, dejando a mis hijas. Entre llantos, me llevé a mi hijo de 2 años y una mochila de ilusiones estancados por el tiempo.
The installation, that particular projection, and then also the other installations with City Hall were really meaningful because when we think about the city of Philadelphia, we have all these symbols of freedom. We have the Liberty Bell, we have the Declaration of Independence, we have all of these images and all of these messages that talk about freedom and liberty. And in the meantime, an hour and 20 minutes away, we have a prison that's detaining families, right? And so to have these works in these spaces counteracts those messages or reinforces why we need to take action. If we really want liberty and freedom for all, what does that necessarily mean? And what is the action that we need to take? The other thing that I had mentioned to George earlier, I play these videos because I feel it's really important for you to hear the voice of the community members, that you're able to hear the way and listen to the way that they're telling their stories so that it is not just coming from me. So while I was visiting the mothers at Berks, I wasn't allowed to leave them with any art supplies. After several visits, I found that I was only able to leave paper and pens and small art supplies. And so the idea of creating paper flowers really came from these visits. It's also a tradition that I learned through my grandmother, Mama Icha, Maria Dionisia Navarro. And so every time we would have festivities or we would have our parties, we would actually make these paper flowers. And so the mothers themselves that I connected also carried that tradition in Central America from the countries that they're from. And so we started creating these flowers, and the mothers began to create and write down their messages of freedom. And what was beautiful about creating these flowers is that they traveled outside of the confines of the prison while the mothers were still detained. And so that evolved into the creation of the piece called Flores de Libertad, which translates to Flowers of Liberty. And so a total of 1,600 flowers with messages of freedom, including the flowers made by the mothers at Berks, were hand dyed and assembled at the north gates of City Hall. So this ran in tandem with the projections in the evening. What was great is I was able to offer a number of workshops at the Barnes Foundation. We piloted a space for live workshops, which are now continuing at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia. And by the making of the flowers, it was an opportunity for people to come and sit down and create these flowers and learn about this particular issue and how they could take action. The flowers installed spelled out 10 by 40 feet, the word libertad, which means freedom and liberty. And the creative action was then followed by a press conference led by the Shut Down Berks Coalition, which is a coalition of allies, advocates, and organizers to really put pressure on Governor Wolf at the time to shut down the prison. So I continued my work with the 4 mothers detained at Berks through phase 2 of Familias Separadas project. This is an installation I did in the Capitol steps in Harrisburg. And I created a total of 8 public art installations that were placed in Harrisburg to coincide with the governor elections. After being detained for 651 days, Karen and her son, who is depicted here, were deported back to El Salvador, returning to the violence that they were originally fleeing from. I installed the portraits, and I'll play that again. I installed the portraits of Karen and her son on the Capitol steps, where policymakers and the people in power could shut down the Berks family prison, but also for her image not to be ignored. There were 14 mothers in total that were detained at this prison for close to 2 years, with children as young as my son, as I mentioned, who was 3 years old at the time. And it was really important to bring back the image of Karen, who was deported, into this space so that she is not forgotten. And so the other installations that I created were other works that included a 35-foot mural that was created as a symbol of hope in Allison Hill in Harrisburg, which is basically a 15-minute walk from the Capitol steps. Allison Hill is a place that continues to fight against poverty and violence and the constant attacks of local and state police collaborating with ICE raids. This mural was unveiled as part of the statewide action against family detention that I co-organized with the Shutdown Berks Coalition. And over 200 people from all over the state gathered at the Capitol steps and then marched to this mural. So this is a moment where you see us finally arriving to the mural. The mother pictured in the mural is Delmi, and she lost her life to a violent, tragic event a month after this photo was taken of her. She was living in another state, and when we did the actual dedication and the state action, I was able to bring her back to this place, and where she was able to connect with all of the organizers, the faith-based organizations, all of the people that were supporting her and her son's freedom. I'm happy to say that her son now is free to be in the United States, as well as 2 of the other mothers that will be featured in the film tonight. Before her unexpected death, she and her son were able to witness this moment, and I was able to capture this work. And these are her words: "My son is the only one that gives me strength." So really, telling our stories is a way to honor our lives and preserve our history. And her story lives on with this mural, which is only one of the 8 that is still a permanent piece. So if you go to Allison Hill in Harrisburg, you will be able to see this mural. And also her story lives on in the documentary that features the mother's testimonials and continues really to, her words continues to serve as an inspiration to the people in Allison Hill. So this is a short clip of the documentary that will be shown tonight as part of our screening, Las Madres de Berks, for those who cannot make it tonight. And it shares the testimonials, again, of 4 out of the 14 mothers that were detained.
Those set of eyes, we really took a look at the moms, you know, as families, as a mom, not as somebody who's here unlawfully or who entered unlawfully, but, you know, as asylum seekers. And we tend to forget that, you know, they are fleeing a lot of things, but yet they're asylum seekers. And having the detention center being so close by, about 40-minute drive from Harrisburg, and then a 50-minute walk from Allison Hill to the Capitol steps, I think it's a good connecting piece, connecting pathway, that being so close to the Capitol is so far away from us.
Y al gobernador, pues lo que le dije una vez al oficial de inmigración: póngase en mis zapatos y dígame, ¿qué le contestaría a su hijo si su hijo le dice: mamá, ¿por qué no podemos ir por un helado? Mamá, ¿por qué no podemos ir por ropa? Mamá, ¿por qué no puedo salir? Mamá, ¿por qué no puedo ir a un parque? Mamá, ¿por qué no puedo ser libre? Quisiera que él se pusiera en los zapatos de nosotros y que que tomara 2 minutos de su tiempo y que tratara de analizar el daño y el trauma que les está haciendo a los niños. Eso.
Pues el mensaje que yo les mando pues a los padres, tanto como a algunas madres que siguen detenidas, pues como yo lo hacía todos los días, de orarle a Dios. Nosotros declaramos victoria, declaramos libertad y que cantábamos que íbamos a ser libres, libres, y así fue como Dios nos pudo sacar. Siempre nosotros decíamos que vamos a ser libres, vamos a salir de aquí, vamos a salir en victoria, y así fue como nosotros salimos.
Una nube nada más, voy contando aguaceros de amapola y flamboyán.
The mother that was sharing her message to the governor, that was Karen. And I forgot to mention that her son Stephen, at the time when they were detained, he was 6 years old and he had 2 suicide attempts while he was in the prison. She is back in El Salvador and working, and her son is a beautiful young boy, a growing boy. But, you know, I think that's the other thing when we talk about the impact of detention and immigration, the unjust immigration system and the detention system is not just the time that you're released, but the impact emotionally, right? That weighs on the families, weighs on particularly these children, and how they move forward from that. So please, if you can, come see the film tonight. Telling our stories can transform spaces into moments of healing. And so in June 2020, the Frank Rizzo mural and statue was removed in Philadelphia. For those that don't know who Frank Rizzo was, he was an Italian-American mayor who violently targeted Latino and Black communities and was also involved in the 1985 Move bombing. This is the community that I was born and raised in. And Rizzo, and I went to schools that taught me that Rizzo was a hero because he came from South Philly, is Italian American, became the first Italian American mayor. And it wasn't until I was really an adult that I learned his legacy, both good and bad. And what I share with people is, especially within my community, because I still live in South Philadelphia, what's known as the Italian market or the 9th Street market, that's where I was born and raised, is that it's not my responsibility to change his legacy. But what's most important is to really reflect who we are in this space, who we are in this community that goes beyond the legacy of one person. And so on 9th Street, the 9th Street market, for those that live on 9th Street, we call it 9th Street, or the Italian market, the removal of the Rizzo mural really resurfaced racism and xenophobia. And my response to these events was to create Cleanse, which was a series of video projections that uses images, messages, color, and light to support the collective visual healing in public spaces. So I organized the first projection here at the 9th Street Market to visually cleanse the former site of this mural 1 month after its removal. And so we filled the blank wall and dark space with illuminated images of the people of the market. The opening scene that you will see are actually my mother's brown hands cleansing the space with clear water. Which is what she did. She worked in the market for 25 years, cleaning and cooking for an Italian family during her time. And so it was fitting to have her hands as a way of cleansing that space. And other images include images of Mexican and Black laborers as part of the market instead of victims of violence. And so the projection really also included healing haikus from a very famous poet, Ursula Rucker, and a final image of a Vietnamese mother who is praying to Buddha for protection and peace. And so we projected these images that really filled the space with light. And that evening, I actually stood there with my mother and other neighbors. Mind you, this was at the height of the pandemic, so not a lot of people were going out and gathering. And it really became a solemn prayer at that moment. So it really demonstrates, that moment really demonstrates the power of the image and the importance to truly see the people who make the market thrive. So in Cleanse really took place while I was still developing my art market project, which is a community-centered, multi-layered, multi-year project that also takes place in the 9th Street Market, which has been my home for 40 plus years. And so our market is really focused on supporting immigrant and migrant business owners, neighbors, and people who reside along the 9th Street Market, which is the known as one of the oldest outdoor markets in the country. And so the project really invests in the market by offering creative community strategies to tackle the issues of gentrification, racism, and erasure. So as you saw, Cleanse was a moment of just coming together with other artists and being able to create that projection. But our market is an investment of many years of working with vendors and the people in the market. My mother immigrated from Colombia to the 9th Street Market over 50 years ago. As I mentioned, she worked for 25 years for an Italian family. And so the relationships that she has cultivated in the market is what I'm building on. So being able to connect with the different folks that she's been able to, build these relationships for people to understand the character, her character, and mine too. My intention in this work in the market is really important. And so, but I also see this work as a love letter to my community. And so, as I mentioned, the 9th Street Market was created over 100 years ago by newly arrived immigrants that collectively fought to claim space in the city of Philadelphia. And while many people associate the market with Italian heritage, a lot of the Italian descendants of Italian immigrants are the ones that have preserved the market for this time. Prior to the arrival of the Italian families, there were Irish and Jewish vendors, and always the presence of African American laborers. And so it's really important for this project to be able to represent all of the multiple stories, all of the multiple people that have come into the market. That includes Southeast Asian refugees like Mr. B, who you see here, who's been there at the market since 1985, to Mexican families, Central American newly arrived immigrants, Caribbeans and South Americans like myself, and also the contributions of African American laborers and customers that have helped the market thrive. So through powerful storytelling, the art market is really around widening the narrative of these stories and really thinking about our collective history that is also American history. Mr. B and Hoa Tran crossed the ocean and survived in different refugee camps while they were caring for their small children, and settled in the market, as I mentioned, in 1985. So one of the things that is very different than the murals and the projections that I've done when I talk about investment, it's really thinking about, well, how does art play a function in the market. And in this case, one of the things that make the market very distinct are our outdoor stands. And so we were able to revitalize the outdoor produce vendor stands. And they're out there on the coldest and hottest days of the year. So the produce vendors are the most under-resourced groups in the market. And through my project, we were able to revitalize, free of cost, the stands of the produce vendors and connected the designs and artwork to Mr. B's story, immigration story in particular. So this is the before and this is the after. And the images that you see are actually folk sayings, Vietnamese folk sayings that were hand painted and placed along the stands. This one translates to, when eating fruits, think of the person who planted the tree. So thinking about the fruits that we're grabbing, the earth, the land workers, the people who are out there providing and nutrients for our families. It's really about shifting that narrative. The other great thing is that there were other pieces that I created. So there were a total of 3 produce vendor stands that we revitalized, really transforming over 150 feet of space along the 9th Street business corridor. And these were some of the other pieces that I created for Lydia and Joel, representing the flower patterns of their celebrations in San Lucas, Puebla. They arrived to the market about 13 years ago. And they have their stand there, but the images, from the colors to how the stands function, those were all design processes that I met with the produce vendors in deciding on. And so this is one of the process videos from the creation of the stands. There we go. Sorry. It keeps on doing that. Sorry about that. So in addition to the produce stands, I also designed and installed a series of light boxes on the south end of Washington. So when I was a child, all of the stands would run from several blocks from Catherine all the way to Federal Street. And so now that's been cut in half. And so on the south side of Washington, which has really been re-energized with the Mexican families inhabiting a lot of the businesses that were there and abandoned, are now very active and they have contributed to the market in that way. So this is Cristina Martinez, which is she is a James Beard award-winning chef. She actually received an award as the best chef in the Mid-Atlantic region last year, and she's in our neighborhood. This is an image of her light box that represents her poem, which translates to, "Oh Philadelphia, my flesh and my blood run through your veins like the waters from your rivers that flow around you." Cristina immigrated to Philadelphia with her son, who also passed away at a very early age. And she continues the tradition of barbacoa in Philadelphia. And is, like I mentioned, nationally known as an amazing chef. These are her hands, along with the drawings of embroidery that I created. And they were installed this light box was installed in these different locations, highlighting the stories of the different business owners. And so what's really important is that when we think about immigration, we think about immigrants, the conversation always tends to lean regarding our contributions is connected to labor. And what I try to tell people is that we're much more than our labor. right? Thinking about the love and spirit in this space, in this market, like my family. We're raising our children. We're creating a life. We're contributing our culture and our traditions as well, and adding to the richness of this place. So I felt that it was really important to highlight some of these stories and responses of the different community members, like Brenda, and thinking about these stories of hope or phrases that determine hope for her. So in the case of Brenda, this is her son. There's a beautiful phrase is let's continue to dream awake. And the phrase a Dios le debo la vida, Tepito la comida is to God I owe my life and to Tepito I owe my food. And Brenda actually is from Mexico City, and she migrated from one market in Tepito to another market in Philadelphia. And so this is a phrase that she remembered in her home community. And so Javier talks about a mother's embrace when I asked him what is an image that reminds you of light and hope. So this is an image of his wife and his son. And siempre hay una luz en el camino. There's always a light in our path. That is a phrase that came from Javier's interview and phrases. So, thinking about all this work is thinking about how telling our stories is a way to shine light and to also emphasize what connects us, right, to one another. So I'm going to end here because I want to open the space for some questions. So as artists, how do we begin to shift power structures? How do we utilize our privilege, our skills and resources as a way of providing opportunities to others? How do we support others to have the courage to share their stories, especially when they feel that they're not seen or represented? And how do we humanize the conversations around immigration and identity in America through the power of storytelling? So for over 20 years, going on to 25 years, the intention of my work has been focused on moving the image beyond what is expected, to create a platform that really amplifies and energizes the existing power and the existing voice of the community, and really thinking of a way to respond to these critical issues, to provide empathy, to create awareness, and really to spark action, and doing this in a way that is both poetic and powerful. So I leave you with that, and thank you for allowing me to share my work with all of you. Any questions?
Not a question as much as to commend you on your purpose, your spirit, your beauty. It's wonderful. I hope you spread it around the world.
Thank you. Thank you. That's an amazing question, and great question, because I forgot to mention this. The Berks County Residential Center Family Prison has been shut down. Yes. And so just a quick update on that. So it took 8 years. And again, with the continued fight of lawyers, organizers, allies, a lot of faith-based also organizations that supported the families and the mothers as well. The mothers fighting for their campaign. And as of January of this year, they closed down the center permanently. And it's incredibly important because Berks County Family Prison was looked as an example, like a cookie cutter example, to replicate this in other counties that are, economically struggling, like Berks County, and in the guise of providing local jobs. Right. And I think it's really important, especially with the film and to share this work, is that for local people to understand the cost of that, right? And what does the impact that it has to the families and the children that were detained at the time. There are still many immigrant detention centers in the country. But I think when people think of Pennsylvania, they don't think about an immigrant detention center. They think about this issue being a border issue. Arizona, California, Texas. But really, it's a national issue. It's a global issue as well, right? And so what's great about Berks is that organizing actually works. And it is a beautiful, amazing, and powerful example of when people come together that you can actually create change and shut down a prison like Berks. And so right now I'm trying to both archive my work around Berks because there were beautiful letters that were written by the mothers. This past summer, we had a show at Vox Populi Gallery in Philadelphia. The Shut Down Berks Coalition organized this show, and it showed all of the banners, the letters, all of the campaign work. So I'm trying to work with the coalition to find a way to archive that work as well and the legal documents so that for anyone else that's dealing with the same fight or issue, they can actually access that work and learn from all of us and how we were able to organize and be able to shut this down. What I can also say is that the mothers that I connected with, the 4 mothers that will be featured in the documentary that we'll be screening tonight, 2 of them have actually, one of them called me during my presentation. Her ears might have been ringing. 2 of them are finally safe to stay in the United States. They have their resident status as well as their children. Delmi, unfortunately, as I mentioned, had passed away, but her son was able to finally also achieve a permanent status in the United States. And Karen is still in El Salvador with her son, who is also thriving and free. And so the mothers, I can share this now, is that the documentary, it has been acquired officially from the library at the University of Scranton. So anyone who is a student or teacher and wants to access the film, you're able to do that in your classrooms. And then also there's a facilitator's guide. There's a bilingual facilitator's guide to help guide communities, whether it's you're an artist working with communities or a professor in a educational setting, to have conversations around this. Tonight we'll have 2 other speakers that are going to speak to their own advocacy efforts, but it's more their perspective locally. And that was a strategy that I learned from the organizers when we did 26 screenings of the film as part of the advocacy efforts to shut down Berks all throughout the state of Pennsylvania. And most states, we didn't come here, but we were in many other places. And we paired it with organizers from the Shut Down Berks Coalition. So when we shared the film, then people were able to see the film and then learn how they can take action in kind of different varying ways. So I'm just incredibly just moved to be a part of that work, and the film and the work with the public art installations were just one little dot in the many dots of the spectrum of work that was done to shut down the center. But yeah, I'm so happy to say yes, it's been shut down.
Thank you very much for your presentation. If you were to recommend to the United States immigration system, would your recommendation be to say just continue to take people as they come?
Well, I mean, the immigration system in our country, even so, and this is what I've learned from the organizers. So I'm speaking to you not as an immigration lawyer or an organizer in the same way as the Shut Down Berks Coalition. But what I've learned is that through them is that the immigration system is not a clear-cut straight line. Like, you go, okay, I have to get A and then B and then C, and you just know what the procedure is. It is something that is very difficult to navigate. You also have to have a lot of resources because there's a lot of fees, a lot of lawyer fees, a lot of there are a lot of obstacles to jump over in order to get status. And so for someone who is going through that particular process, and there's different ways. In the case of the mothers, they were asylum seekers, and so they have the legal right, as many other people who come to our border as asylum seekers, to seek asylum in the United States. That is part of our law, right? the problems around detention and processing people that are coming in that are seeking refuge, right? That is one of the many issues, but one of the biggest issues is the fact that there was no reason for the mothers at Berks to be detained for 2 years. And most people, when I give people the length of time, so for example, Maria's husband, who I mentioned with the Compass Rose, her husband was detained for 3 years. People think that deportation happens like, oh, you're detained and then you're within the next day you're deported, or within a week you're deported. These families are detained for a long length of time. And so what this actually falls under is the mass incarcerations issue that we have in the United States. Because by having a bed or having a cell being occupied means that there are federal funds that are being funneled in order to keep that person in that space as long as they can. And that was really the case of the mothers at Berks. There was no reason for them to be detained for that long. But then also there were a lot of faith-based organizations that wanted to sponsor the families, which eventually did happen. Some of the families that were released would stay with some of the families until they were able to sort out their asylum cases. And so what I'm saying is that the process of immigration in terms of the system, it's the length of time, it's the money that is an issue that becomes a huge obstacle. But what I've also encountered when I've shared this work is that for people who are US citizens like myself and many others, when they hear this, their inclination is to say, well, I want to, how can I be of service in sponsoring a family? How can I help a family? So instead of funneling that money into a prison, could there be a system in which we can support US citizens who are able to open spaces for asylum seekers, like these families, while they were processing their system of asylum, while they're processing what is their status here in the United States, right? Those are one out of many option solutions. I mean, in terms of the advocacy with the Shut Down Berks Coalition, you know, there's a huge issue with borders, but it really comes down to financial gain, right? And it's financial gain on the backs of families that are suffering and trying to seek refuge. And so that is the bigger conversation to have. And but I would say that that's just one out of many options, as I mentioned, in terms of supporting refugees, asylum seekers, and finding a way to not have them in the confines of a prison. A lot of the families that were then released, so for example, the two mothers that now have status, they still would go to the court dates. They still had ICE visit them. When I was doing my documentary, ICE agents were still coming, and they had to have a daily report. Some of them had probation bracelets still on, so they were still being monitored. That's not the ideal situation, but they're outside of the prison, and they have agency over their children, like when they eat, when they sleep, how to discipline their child. Some of the children as young as, I mentioned, 4 years old, were not allowed to sleep in the same bed as their mothers, right? And that's it's heartbreaking. So there are ways. Overall, if we can eliminate incarceration, if we can eliminate these detention centers, that would be the ideal goal. But I think that presenting other strategies in which we can do that, those were some of the things that would come out, actually came from even the mothers themselves. There was a father who was detained, and he had said, because there's a huge opioid addiction problem in Berks County. And so his solution was close down the prison and have this as a rehabilitation service instead of have it serve the local community. And so those are the ideas and alternatives to be able to present to people when they say, well, if this isn't the way, what is the way, right? There's more to it, but I'll just share that for now. But good question. Anyone else? Yes. Oh, let's get the mic so I can hear you and everyone else can hear you.
I'd like to, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I don't know if everyone else can, but I can repeat your question.
I'd like to see your program from Philadelphia around City Hall move to the Capitol in Washington to press for comprehensive immigration policy. It has to be changed.
Yes.
The Republican Party is keeping it on the back burner because they love the issue of immigration. To use it to threaten people to get them to vote Republican. So move to Washington, please.
Yes. Did everybody hear that? Okay. For you, was saying that the project that I did in City Hall to actually have it to do that in Washington D.C. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, there have been actually most recently there's an organization called Monument Lab, and they just did these huge public art installations in the National Mall. And some of them had to, there were all these different themes that were presented there. I sit on the board of that organization. So there's a conflict of interest of me being one of the artists, but I'm really proud of the work that they're doing and really thinking about, at these past few years, we've had a lot of monuments come down. So then how are we revisioning what a monument is? I've also know that there have been a couple of installations that have been presented in Washington in particular, and some that are really complicated for me because there have been artists who have done like cages and then the sound of a child crying in an emergency blanket, and it's really to spark that kind of gut reaction, right? Or shock. Thank you. Shock to that issue. And that sometimes only lasts for so long, right? And so for me, whether that's one of the reasons why I did the film is because I wanted to make sure that the mothers had a chance to share their story, but also through the public art installations that I did in the Capitol, I wanted people to really connect with the story of the mothers and the children, right? And not for the shock value, but if I can have somebody resonate as a mother to another mother, or we've all been children, so we know what it is to be free, hopefully, right? And to be loved, to then connect on that level, right? Because I think that that helps sustain the need or the want to take action, because when you have an emotional investment or a connection in that way, so yeah, I would be more than interested to do something in Washington, but not for that shock value. Like it has to be something that can evoke that sense of again, humanity, right, around this issue. And as I mentioned, like, whether it's financial gain, it's political gain, that unfortunately it's used, it gets used to reach a certain position or to receive a certain number of dollars. But it's an ongoing issue. And, I think being in the market, for example, and having a friend who's Italian American, right? And driving through Scranton and, learning about her history. And, we're not that far separated from a great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, or even parents that are immigrants. And so when we think about what defines us as Americans, like, there's Irish, there's Scottish, there's Polish, there's, how we identify or create this concept of what is white, right? When in reality, we're all descendants of immigrants, right? And it's paying homage and acknowledging that. And even in the work in the market with Italian families that might be a little resistant to the change is, well, they are in a position to, like locally in my community, what I try to do is to share like how can you create change and create systems in which and resources in which you would have wanted your grandparents or great grandparents to have been treated, right? And so then that shifts a little bit of that perspective of the they and us. And it becomes more of actually, what are we learning from this opportunity and our position and how we can influence positive change in our spaces. So yeah, when I'm in Washington, you'll see, you'll check it out. All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks again.